Okay, so we're going to look at the gradient mesh and how to use it to create realistic looking lips. So we've been working on this image for the past couple of weeks, and now it's time to really look down here into the lips. Now, one thing that I do want to point out again is notice that I have really large thumbnails in my layers palette. This is really helpful when you're switching back and forth between outline mode and preview mode when you're using the mesh, especially in outline mode when you're trying to apply color and you have no visual feedback at all whatsoever. It's not a great feedback that you're getting from the thumbnail, but at least you can get some idea of what's happening rather than flying completely blind. So if you don't remember how to do that, go to your layers panel, and in this top right hand corner you'll see the little list icon. Click on that and then go down to your panel options. Notice I have mine set to other. I clicked on the other radio button and I typed in 80 pixels. And once you have that set, you can just click OK. Anywhere from 60 to 80 is fine. I like mine extra big when I'm working in the mesh, so I set mine to 80. Now, one of the challenges that we're having with this particular illustration that I've been working on is I chose a portrait that is on an angle. If you look at the line going across Emily's eyes, if we look at her eye line, that's about at a 45-degree angle. Now what makes this complicated is you can see, let me activate the mesh. Notice that rather than the mesh moving vertically and horizontally across the angle of her face, like following her line of her nose down vertically and following her eye line across horizontally, it's using just the X and Y axis to create the grid. So it's just moving across. Now, this becomes really problematic when we start looking at the lips, because we really want this defined. Let me lock this so that it won't activate so much. Let me lock a couple of these things. So when I'm going across, I want to make sure that this line of the lips is really harsh. Now, if I do something where I have a crisscross line like this one, it's going to be really difficult to do. This is the original drawing that I did along with the angle of the face. Now, what I have decided to do is create a new set of lips based on this one. Now, if I just simply make a copy of this for whatever reason, even prior to making the mesh, if I make a mesh or if I make a copy of the file, even though it's a brand new copy, it is remembering how I drew it. So when I create the mesh, it'll come out crisscrossed, just like this one. So what we're going to have to do is redraw the lips. And because the lips are fairly simple, it's not a big deal. Now, going in here with the pen tool, we're just going to quickly follow along these points. Not making too much of a fuss about this right now. Oops, I've got a black fill. The Alt key is to turn it into a cusp point. Trying to think about prime point placement here. Anglishka is full of good information. And just kind of going through. And closing it out. Okay. So now we've got our lips. I'm going to turn these other ones off. Well, we'll turn these off just for a minute. This is really the goal. This is what we want the lips to look like in the end, or close to it, something similar. But I'm going to go ahead and shut it off now. We're going to work on this. Now, I'd probably refine that edge a little bit more, but for demo purposes, we'll just let it go as is. Now, with this, I do want to get some base color that's a little nicer to work with, more of a flesh tone. So I'm going to go ahead in here with my eyedropper tool and choose this kind of darker shadow color that's underneath her lip. Then I'm going to go to Control Y, and with the rotate tool, I'm going to hit the R, or you can click on it here in the tool panel. And I'm just going to rotate these set of lips into place. Then I'm holding down the Command key to switch over to my black arrow tool and kind of bringing it back to place. Now, to be quite honest, if I was going to do this for an illustration, my own illustration, I would work on these points. It's kind of driving me crazy. I might go ahead and just shift a few things around that just simply don't look like they're working correctly. Here. That line was pretty flat and wasn't really matching the edge at all. This one, her lip lines are very low. So we'll go ahead and fix this up and have it look a little bit better than what it was. And again, I probably would continue playing with this, but for demo purposes, I'm going to leave it as it is. Now notice I am not going to include these teeth showing through. It's really hard to make teeth look like they're set back and natural. And I'm just going to have my lips in a pursed shape rather than trying to deal with the teeth. So let's go back to Control Y. Oops. Now, let's go ahead and create our gradient mesh. Now, notice this is a very odd thing. We already rotated it, but because we drew it on a, horizontal axis, it's remembering that, and it's creating the gradient mesh in that fashion, which is really interesting. So it depends on how you draw it, not how, you can rotate it 100 times. It's just an odd thing. So if I had drawn this at a 45-degree angle and then rotated it to write it prior to creating the gradient mesh, it still would have that crisscross look. So very, very interesting, but something to note. So if you have a problem like this, you might want to go through the steps that I've just done by by writing the original and then drawing the shape again. It's kind of an arduous process, but well worth it for something like the lips. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to break my rule where I said that you should never do more than 10 when you're starting out with a gradient mesh. But I know with the gradient mesh, I want to have that sharp line of the lips. So to create a sharp line, you need to really have 3 lines. You need to have the line where you're creating that dark shadow, and then you need to have 2 other lines on either side, a line on either side that you're going to kind of sandwich it together and make a really sharp edge, to make the really sharp edge. So I'm going to go ahead with 7 rows and 5 columns to start. I have the preview checked. I'm going to go ahead and have my highlight sent to center, even though I'm going to rearrange this anyway. I just, for whatever reason, for me, I like to have that 3D effect where I'm working from the start. And then when I'm ready, I'm going to click OK. So there's my gradient mesh. Now, I'm going to come down here because we know that once we go into outline, we are going to have all of this, even though I have the face locked and the nose locked, and I'm not going to be too concerned about the nose, but really it's the face in the background that's becoming a little problematic. when I'm in outline mode. So I'm going to turn the visibility on the face layer off. I'm going to come back up here to my lips. Now, first thing we want to do is start selecting with the white arrow tool some of, well, what I want it to be the center line. So I have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, what do I have? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh, yes. So it's actually giving me 6 sections, 6 rows, and not 6 lines. 7. It's giving me 7 sections with 6 lines. So I'm going to go ahead and select the center line. Go through here. And this one's always kind of tough because you're not really sure where you are. So I've got this line selected. Now I'm going to take my eyedropper tool and I'm going to select a nice deep shadow, one of these pixels, to apply that. Now I can see, this is what I'm talking about with my visual feedback that I have right here. This is great. I can see that it actually took the color and it's going all the way across. That's nice. So the next thing I'm going to do is just start using my command key to go back to the white arrow tool to select that particular anchor point, and then I'm going to just select the color that's near that anchor point. So I'm command or control clicking depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC. So, and in some cases I might give myself a little bit more wiggle room and creative license to pick some different colors if I'm trying to make, you know, more of a 3D effect. Oops. And you got to be careful. Notice in my icon over here I have my thumbnail. I've got blue, so I must have clicked directly on a line. So let's try that again. There we go. That looks better. So just kind of going through and picking colors. I want to have a little bit more shadowing here. So I'm going to apply, and I'm hitting shift click so I can apply the shadow across the edge of 3 different anchor points. So I'm just continue my way through selecting the colors that I want. For that particular anchor point, or hitting Control Shift to select multiple anchor points. Now at some point you may need to zoom in, like right here I have all of these and they're so close together it's hard for me to make a selection, so I'm going to zoom in. Now notice when my zoom tool looks like this, that means that I'm zoomed all the way in. So going back to the eyedropper tool, I am going to just click around. And make some color selections in here. Now, I mean, from my thumbnail preview, I'm actually looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and zoom out. And let's hit Control Y to see how we're doing. Now, this is all well and good, but I have a couple problems. One of them is that this line is very soft. So to create that harsh line, what I'm going to do is shift click with the direct select tool, the white arrow tool. I'm going to shift click and this entire line, and I'm going to shift it down. Now when I do this, you can see that there's some bends happening, and that's not really great. but and I might even want to move this outer edge as well. But I can go through and fix that. So let's start looking at these individual points. So I'm clicking A to get to the white arrow tool on my toolbar, or you can just go and click on it in the toolbar itself. I find it to be much quicker just to use keyboard commands. So I'm just going to go through and try to tuck back a few more of these handles so I'm not having such a big problem with them being close. And that way I'll have less of this ridging that's occurring and just a nice sharp line. So you remember the 2/3 rule is when you have your handle should only take 2/3 of the line up. So I'm going to move this a little closer and tuck it in. So going through, and you can see this can be a little time consuming. It's the mesh. It's just the essence of the mesh. So now I went ahead and I made a pretty sharp line for my center lip on top. But I purposefully left this a little softer on the bottom. And the reason why I did that is really the top part of your lip is going to create a really sharp edge because it's where it's physically stopping. But the bottom is going to be more of a soft shadow. So you can tuck it in a little bit to get a harder, a little bit harder edge to your shadow, but you don't want to bring it all the way up like we did on the top lip, because that's not really the effect we're going for. So we're going to bring it down. Now, this is actually looking pretty good, considering. I might have a slightly darker color here, and maybe a lighter color on this particular portion of the lip and a darker one on this side. It's looking a little bit warped, but let's go ahead before we make any final decisions of how this is working and turn the face back on. Now, and I'm going to deselect by hitting Control or Command Shift to see how we are. Now, one of the things that we have to be careful about, now I've talked about this before, with the lips, since there is a physical color change, there's going to be a fairly strong edge on the lips, but not necessarily everywhere. So what I'm going to do is change the opacity to a few of these points. So I'm going to zoom in, and it's mainly going to be on the edge of the mouth. So I'm going to take my black arrow, or my white arrow tool rather, and kind of just click and drag to grab all of these points on the corner. I think I missed one, so I'm going to go again. And here I'm going to go ahead and change that to 0%, softening how that interacts. And then maybe around here on these edges, might change those to maybe 30%. And I'll even soften these top two to 40% or 50%. I'm going to do the same thing on this side and select this whole edge and change that to 0%. And I really want this fairly soft, this top one, and change it to 30. And this bottom one, I'm going to leave that at about 60. Now if I zoom out, oops, maybe not that far. Let's get close enough so we can really see her face. Got a pretty good look here for our final lip. Now one of the things I do want to point out that I have already done, and I'm still need to tweak it, actually a fair amount, is notice that I have some highlight and shadow points I'll unlock this so you can see the mesh. I have some highlight and shadow points on around the mouth, on the upper lip, and on the chin. If you don't have those and you just have a flat color in those areas, you're going to look like you stuck a perfectly drawn pair of lips on a sheet of paper. So make sure you do have modeling going through this area and on the and underneath on the chin that shows the elevation change on your face, on the portrait that you're working on. I will also be doing a video in just a little bit on how to create those gradients. This is just two radial gradients on top of one another, but I'll have that in an additional video. I hope this helped.